Okay, welcome everybody. Turnkey helps mission-driven organizations make good friendships that last a long time. We have been doing our best to deliver information to help your organization be successful during the COVID-19 pandemic. And today we are bringing you more in-depth insights into the psychology of recognition. Before we get to the content, just a couple housekeeping items. Before you ask, because I know many of you will, we are recording this webinar and we will share that recording as well as a PowerPoint deck with you in an email and also post it on our COVID-19 homepage. So you will definitely be able to access the recording and the deck after this session today. Also, we look forward to answering all of your questions. The best way to ask is use the Q&A icon, and you can put them in there whenever they come to your mind, and we will be sure to save plenty of time at the end to answer all of them. So now to introduce our speakers. First, we have Katrina Van Huss, who is the CEO of Turnkey. Katrina has been developing revenue programs for organizations like the American Lung Association, the Arthritis Foundation, and March of Dimes since 1989 when she founded Turnkey. Her clients' successes and her dedication to research have made her a sought-after speaker. She also regularly shares her wit and business experiences blogging for Nonprofit Pro and is the co-author of the 2017 book, Dollar Dash, The Behavioral Economics of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising. We also have Otis Fulton, who is the Vice President of Psychological Strategy at Turnkey. Otis speaks regularly on the psychology of fundraising at national conferences. He writes a weekly blog on psychology and fundraising for Nonprofit Pro and is the other co-author of the 2017 book, Dollar Dash, The Behavioral Economics of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising. Otis has degrees in social psychology from Virginia Commonwealth University and the University of Virginia. And FYI, Katrina may interrupt or even talk over Otis sometimes because, well, they're married and that's what happens at home. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Katrina.
All right, thanks everybody and welcome. I see many friends on the list and I'll consider you all, the rest of you, new friends. So what we're talking about today is recognition, and recognition is a huge driver of human behavior and one of the most important things that we have to work with in nonprofits. So we really want to dig down and understand what it is and how it works in terms of human decision making and the formation of attitudes. So what we want you to do is to start thinking of recognition differently. Recognition in the past has been a thing we did. Well, we did logistics, we did messaging, we did some recognition over here. We want you to reframe that and think of recognition now as everything. It is literally the language with which you speak to your constituents in every way. And we'll dig down into this and help you understand that stand better. But it is truly our language now. Otis?
So, why is recognition so important to people? Why is it so motivating? This is a picture of tribesmen on the African savannah. And this is where 98% of our ancestors lived in small groups, much like this, around 12 to 15 people, our anthropologists tell us. And this is where our modern brains evolved to survive. And the biggest factor for survival on the African savannah was sociability, the ability to get along with, interact with members of your group. And humans are, hardwired for sociability. And it turns out that recognition is a major social cue. Being recognized by your group meant that when there was resources to be shared, think food, you would be included. So over the tens of thousands of generations, our antenna for recognition became very finely tuned. And it's just evolution. Individuals who are more sensitive to how their group recognized them survived more. And so again, this became a very finely honed, intuitive skill of ours. And that was a theory in ethnological psychology for many years. And then about 15 years ago, we started getting the access to MRI scanners. And we started putting people in MRI scanners. And one researcher out on the West Coast at UCLA had people read simple recognition statements when they were in an MRI scanner. Things like, I know that you're always someone who I can count on when I need help. Just simple little things like that. And what happened when they read these recognition statements is the reward system of the brain lit up, and it was the same reward system that lights up when they ate their favorite food. So that's how deeply ingrained this response to recognition is. In fact, the foremost expert on this, a guy named Matthew Lieberman at UCLA, he wrote a book, great book called Social Why Our Brains Are Wired to Connect. He says our brains crave the positive evaluation of others to an almost embarrassing degree. And he wrote that because he noted that it's not only being recognized by some of your friends and family that you'd expect to have this kind of a response to, but it's complete strangers that can light up our brains with this reward pathway. Again, that's how sensitive our antenna to recognition really is. And we know that people want to be recognized. As I started doing research on this years ago, I was surprised to learn the billions in dollars that are donated each year to charity, less than 1% is donated anonymously. So, taking us back to the savannah, we want others to see that we're behaving in ways that will benefit the group. Psychologists talk about the warm glow effect after doing something for someone else, and that certainly is there, but it's really, we want others to see us behaving in, psychologists call it, pro-social manner, and we know that people behave more pro-socially in public than they do in private as well.
So recognition, what form does it take? It can take a lot of different forms. And this is one reason we say this is everything we do. Every touch point you have with someone, every acknowledgement of their existence is a moment of recognition. When you say hello to someone on the street, with your eyes these days, you are acknowledging them, you're recognizing them. In our world, it takes place at every touch point, but we have categorized it into some spaces like, a great form of recognition is to stand someone up on stage, or to say their name from stage, to applaud them from stage, to applaud them in any way, to applaud me in the chat. That is a huge form of recognition. When I called out names before we started, I am recognizing people. Another way we do it that is highly quantifiable is with product. And that was the genesis of Turnkey was with product. We've left that space now, but that is a huge way that we say to people, I see you and I recognize you. I see what you've done and I'm saying thank you with this gift.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about free choice behaviors. And I'll invite Katrina to interrupt me because I was talking about this for a good year and she just kept saying, I don't get it. I don't get it. I get it. So, so it told me that this is not an easy thing to grasp, but free choice behaviors are the foundation of affinity to anything, including nonprofit organizations, missions, and so forth. If people believe that they're doing something of their own volition, then they will believe in that they're an animal rights advocate. I pick up a dog on the highway, much to Katrina's horror. One time, no one was around me because I'm an animal rights advocate. It's something that I believe in. It was a free choice, and preserving these free choice behaviors for our supporters is absolutely essential if we're going to sustain their support for our missions and so forth. You've probably heard the expression, it's the things we do when no one is watching. That's what free choice behaviors are. And there's been a lot of research over the years that psychologists,
okay.
Yes.
Don't go forward yet. Don't go
right.
forward yet because
Okay.
I got to ask some questions here.
Fine.
So free choice behaviors, he kept saying this and saying this. And I'm like, does that mean there's no law against it or for it? And therefore I can freely choose? And he said, yes. But the nuance that I was missing, and I blame you, is that free choice also implies that I was not motivated by something beyond my own inclinations. So for example, if I did something in order to get paid, no longer a free choice behavior. If I did something in order to get that cool Nike jacket, not exactly a free choice behavior anymore. So Otis, can you hit that a little bit? Because that's the nugget I was missing when you kept saying free choice behavior.
Well, no, I think you said it pretty well. I signed a contract to play professional basketball after college. And suddenly, because I was being paid to play basketball, I didn't enjoy it very much anymore. Now it became a job. And, I think that the quickest way to drive volunteers away is to start paying them a small stipend, because then it goes from them doing the behaviors because of their own free will, because they enjoy it. And of course, they're not doing it because of the stipend, but just introducing a little bit of a payment really frames it in a different way for them. And now they become, maybe unconsciously, low paid workers. Psychologists have done a lot of study on this, and their recommendation is either pay people a lot or don't pay them at all. And these tangible gifts that we're going to talk about and so forth are an example of very small payments that have very big impacts on people's behaviors.
So I want to clarify one thing. You say pay them a lot or don't pay them at all. We're going to talk about the not at all or what equates to not at all, but pay them a lot means their motivation is due to the pay. That's not an area that nonprofit plays in, right? That is when we're talking about compensation.
That's absolutely not. Then they're a professional. They're not a volunteer. They're a professional.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So let me just throw this out there. You know, we work in peer-to-peer a lot, but we do work in other areas too, particularly on this front. So I'm at a gala and I'm soliciting a donation via paddle raise for money. People are bidding silent auction and they get the 2-week condo in Hawaii. What's happening in my head as the purchaser?
As a purchaser?
As the person who won the 2 weeks with my bid.
Well, again, the outcome is that I'm doing it. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into that.
All right,
We're going to get into that with something called the exchange fiction in a couple of moments. But yes.
All right, go ahead.
All right, okay. So let's take a look at some of the research that's been done over the years. Edward Deci is a social psychologist god, and he's been studying this for 30 years. One of my heroes. In 1999, he did a meta-analysis. You remember from our statistics classes, a meta-analysis is an analysis of many studies, 128 studies. And he looked at the effects of giving people rewards for things that they are doing because they intrinsically enjoy them, because they want to do them. And so I kind of translated this a little bit for, it looks like a kind of a weird Christmas tree, for the nonprofit world. So red means they're less likely to repeat the behavior or donate or volunteer. Green means they're more likely to repeat, and black is neutral. So all rewards are kind of neutral. The thing that's very positive in terms of getting people to repeat their behavior is thank you or impact communications. Because of you, an animal was freed. Because of you, a starving child was fed. These kinds of things impact communications. And then just good thank yous. Other research says that, we can't thank people enough, and just one additional thank you a year really helps people to focus their attention on the nonprofit. I don't think that we thank people nearly enough. Now, with gifts, tangible gifts were demotivating in terms of future behaviors. And interestingly, it was the expected gifts that were particularly demotivating. Unexpected gifts were neutral. And now, Deci's research, before you interrupt me, Deci's research did not involve branded gifts that were given by nonprofits. These were just tangible things. He wasn't working in the nonprofit realm. I'm not sure about unexpected gifts that are branded being neutral. I think that they might be positive, and actually something I'd like to do some research on. But expected gifts, saying things like, raise $100 and you'll get a shirt. These expected gifts have been found to be demotivating for future behavior. Katrina?
So I want to make clear what we know and what we don't know. So we know that this study said these gifts were demotivating. And, that makes me want to throw up a little bit, because for 30 years we've been using these gifts and we've been saying it just the way Otis just said it. So this is quite a turning point for us. But what I also want to say is that branded gifts, the act of putting a brand on a jacket, as an example, diminishes the financial value of the jacket, right? It may increase the sentimental value, but in terms of you being able to sell the jacket, get money for it, it goes to zero unless you have a really motivated crowd of people who want an American Lung Association jacket, which is never, right? So, there is some gray area here, but it is what it is, It is what it is. It's very hard to get a gift that is not going to negatively impact your relationship with your fundraiser or your donor, as the case may be. And that makes me sad.
Now, human behavior is complicated. Just because we looked at 128 studies, it doesn't mean that it holds for all situations. And I'm going to give you an example of when it doesn't hold exactly in this way.
And Otis, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. If you guys would throw all the questions into Q&A, we're going to hit them. If I don't do it live typing, we're going to do them all at the end. But, you know, Otis has got his mojo on, so we're going to let him go. Go.
Okay. Thank you for that. In 2001, there was really a seminal study done on this thing called, what psychologists call the exchange fiction. And I'll explain what that was. The actual title of the study was Committing Altruism Under the Cloak of Self-Interest. And so what they did was they offered people the chance to make a donation and to receive a candle in exchange. And what they found was that giving the candle actually spurred people's willingness to do a donation. But what it did not do is affect their subsequent behavior at all. And the way that they explain this, it's a kind of a complex experiment, actually a series of experiments. The way that they explained it is this, that giving people the candle, people avoid making long-term commitments to anything, things like supporting a nonprofit organization. And so by giving them this candle, it allowed them to create this, that's what exchange fiction was, that, you know, sure, giving $50 to the Humane Society was a good thing to do, you know, but I really like the candle. And so what it did was it absolved them of future commitments to the organization because it was kind of an impulse buy on their part. And the candle gave them the cover to behave altruistically, but not get them in too deep. So again, the tangible items, it's not a simple situation. There are times when, yes, it can spur giving, but in terms of having a long-term sustainable relationship with your supporters, they're really demotivating, not motivating. Katrina?
So let's go to the, Sarah asked a good question. What does this do to walk recognition? So for years, you know, we've been studying the impact of applying a gift offer to fundraisers as they were fundraising. And the data was right, it worked. But what we are understanding now is that it worked in the short term. It worked to get us more money now, but in terms of our retention of that fundraiser and in terms of our future lifetime value, it probably hurt us in the end. And I want to take this slide back to the free choice behaviors. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here, because the implication to the person who takes the candle is that it's not a free choice behavior anymore, right? I'm attributing my behavior to the candle instead of to who I am and the way I feel. Is that right, Otis?
That's absolutely correct. And more importantly, it allows them to say that, you know, I donated the $50. Humane Society, oh, listen, great cause and everything, but that was an awful nice candle. And so, you know, when they're presented with the ask again in the future with no candle, they haven't made any long-term commitment. So they're under no personal obligation to continue the support.
Yes. Darn.
Not so. Again, it's not simple stuff, and I don't want to present this as if a simple set of rules that apply to all situations, because, you know, there's nuance here. But we can say, to answer the question, that expected gifts are demotivating to people. I'm very big on the idea of, well, and we're going to get into this later, but not rewarding people for what they do, but rewarding people for who they are. So if you're going to give the jacket, have no expectation. The jacket for a $500 supporter just shows up one day and says, we wanted you to have this jacket because you are an awesome, compassionate person who cares about world hunger. That's the kind of reward that will sustain that relationship. Or
at least not hurt the relationship.
At least not hurt the relationship, yes.
That we don't know that. You know, again, our industry has gotten into the use of premiums and gifts because they drive short-term fundraising, but they hurt long-term affinity. They hurt long-term lifetime value.
Well, you know, I often use this example. say that you're asking your sister to come over to help you clean out your garage on Saturday afternoon. Now, I know you wouldn't do that in COVID-19, but say you did it last December. Would you say, hey, sis, I really like your help. And if you stay for an hour, I'll give you a $10 Starbucks gift card. If you stay for 2 hours, I'll give you a mug. And if you stay for 3 hours, I'll give you a t-shirt in your size. You just wouldn't say that. What you do is they'd come over, you'd have an enjoyable time together. And then at the end, maybe you'd say, give her a hug and say, hey, take this bottle of wine. Thanks so much. It wouldn't be an expected gift. It'd be unexpected gift. That's just a good formula for how we should interact with our supporters in terms of these rewards.
Good.
Okay. So, again, just in general, less is more. If we're going to give these items, kind of 3 things, always be branded every single time. It reminds people of their connection to the organization. And, we wrote a blog some time ago. I'm a big believer in the t-shirt. The most important eyeballs that see a t-shirt belong to the person who's wearing the t-shirt, because it's got your logo right there. And it becomes physically part of their identity. I'm the kind of person that saves animals. I'm the kind of person that this or that and so forth. So it should be always branded. It should be of modest value. Nobody comes and parks cars for 8 hours at your event when we were having events, or works 8 hours for you doing anything for a $2 t-shirt. That just, it kind of blows up the exchange fiction when the items are of modest value. And then the other thing, they should be otherwise unavailable. If we're giving something to our supporters, it should be something that they got just for being an awesome person and for feeding hungry children or whatever it is that they do to support your organization.
So Otis, I want to hit a couple of the questions of subject matter. The problem we face is twofold. Number one, gifts work in the short term, and let's face it, we all have to meet budget this year. And we are willing sometimes to sacrifice next year and the next 20 years to do that. That's a fact. Number two, we have trained our constituents to expect that grill with the logo on it if I raise $10,000. We've trained them to expect an Afghan at 500, the one that we've been using for 10 years. We've trained them to that. So we're not saying it's going to be easy to change. We're saying as you stand up new products, revenue products, as you tweak your old ones, it will have to be a well thought out change, because it's not going to be easy. There will be people screaming a lot if you change your recognition program. We understand that, but understanding the fundamentals of how recognition works will help you morph over time into a more positive relationship. Even, for example, for one client, they wanted to change, they want to change. And to be frank, right now, a lot of people want to change because these recognition programs are expensive. Our recommendation was for a slow shift. And the first thing to shift is the language. Even if we leave the recognition program just as it is, change your language so that you can at least diminish the potential negative impact of the gift by changing your language now and then changing the gift program over the years. Can be done, just needs to be super thoughtful, thinking through the eventualities.
Yeah, and just let me say on to that point, I think that this unexpected gift idea, when I talk with people about it, they're like, gosh, what an amazing idea. Why haven't we thought about that? And I don't know why we haven't thought of that. People who get unexpected gifts, they write thank yous. It's more meaningful to them. So the same $10 item that they earned now becomes a wonderful gift that they didn't expect. How delightful that is. And that's what we want to do in our relationships with our supporters. We want to make them happy and delight them. So yeah. Yes. And you were talking about, why don't you talk about the language? You kind of got into this a moment ago.
I do want to go back to one thing. When you think about the way our recognition programs right now, and, blame me, we designed them so that they felt very transactional. So in an effort to save money 20 years ago, we decided we're going to be really smart and we're only going to give the people gifts who ask for the gift. right? So we set up literally a checkout process. You get a redemption code, you go in, you redeem, you get your gift. Nobody ever sent a thank you note for that gift because it felt like a purchase. It felt like they earned it. And as I came to this realization and realized, oh my God, I own a warehouse. What does this mean to me? And it meant a business model change. I can't go out there and beat this drum anymore. And it's because it's so transactional. It's so transactional. If, as Otis said, that $10 gift shows up unanticipated, number one, you get no inbound traffic because it's not the size they wanted or the color they thought it was or whatever. You get a thank you note. And I think that tells you everything you need to know about the positioning of these gifts. If they send a thank you note, you're in a relationship.
You can talk about messaging?
Yes, messaging. Okay. So we talked about recognition is not a thing you do, it's everything you do. And, we've talked about gifts, that's a touch point. Messaging. We see the change in messaging as probably the most important part of this change. When we talk about redemption codes, checkout, store, then we're in the language of the market. In our messages, my friends at Blackbaud routinely send me messages because they know it just drives me insane. I break out in hives and they keep sending them just to see what I'll do. But registration messages offering discounts if you register by Tuesday with 50% off. Talking about incentives, using the word incentive drives me nuts. Why would we ever use that word? It's the language of the marketplace. It convinces me that, well, it's not a free choice behavior. I must be getting something if I'm going to get an incentive. Giving the word price at all has no place in our world. It's just unfortunate. And the reason we're addicted to it is because it gives us a short-term bump. It gives us a short-term bump. Long-term, it will kill us, but it gives us a short-term bump. And that's why we do it. Go ahead, Evan.
In 2017, Katrina and I wrote the book, Dollar Dash, The Behavioral Economics of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising. And most people are somewhat familiar with behavioral economics. The word nudges might come to mind. Behavioral economics is all about getting people to do a behavior and taking away barriers that keep them from behaving in a certain way and giving them that nudge. And that's important. And we thought, well, giving people nudges using behavioral economics to do things like fundraise and to support and to volunteer and so forth, all good. And we just assumed, though, that after they did the behavior, we could just get them to do the behavior, they're going to be happier. And there are a lot of studies that talk about how people who are involved with nonprofit organizations are happier. They actually live longer than people who are not involved in nonprofit organizations. So we just kind of made that assumption. But behavioral economics kind of stops at the point that they make the behavior. But in the last 10, 12 years, there's been a movement called philanthropic psychology that's kind of the next step. And we've embraced this very greatly, because what philanthropic psychology talks about is what happens after you've acquired the supporter, after they've done that first behavior. It focuses on what keeps them happy, what makes them feel fulfilled with the relationship with your nonprofit. And Katrina, do you want to talk a little bit about our experiences?
I do. We had been thinking hard about this, and Otis doing a lot of research and reading and trying to understand and then what part of this conversation. And then we met the person I like to call Little Elvis, who is Dr. Jen Shang out of the UK. And let me
just interrupt, because Katrina saying, honey, we need to write another book. And I said, I don't know what book we should write. I don't know what to write about, because we hadn't found this yet. But this is the next big thing. This is the next big thing.
And this is the next big thing, folks. Behavioral economics was new when it came into our world. And I think that we are beginning to understand and make use of it. We can use nudges like recognition gifts to push people to a thing. But as Otis said, that what's important is, how do they leave that interaction with us? What did we do? Did we plant a poison seed or put a poison pill in these people with this gift, or did we leave them in a better place? And so philanthropic psychology helps us understand what we're doing, how we leave them, and what impact that has on the future. Dr. Chang's work in the UK, she and Dr. Adrian Sargent have quantified this. It is quantified in science, and the summary of it is that if you pay attention to how you leave the person, you can double fundraising. And this is research done in the direct response market, not in the peer-to-peer market. So this is all new stuff for us, completely new stuff. And the reason Dr. Chang and Otis and I are so very interested in this work is that, as I said, we touch people in a lot of ways. So using the recognition program as a touch point that could potentially leave them in a negative state over the long term, what are we doing with all the other touch points? Are we doing the same thing? Are we screwing that up too in terms of building their well-being and their relationship? And the answer is yes. And there is a better way to do it. And philanthropic psychology is giving us the answers. Otis?
Sure. So let's talk about how you talk to, Katrina said recognition is everything that you do. Every time you talk to your supporters, it's a way to recognize them. So let's look at how messaging, what we know about messaging. When we ask for funds and so forth, we make an appeal. We have assumed that it was the emotion of the appeal. We've got to stir some emotional state in people, and that's what gets them to say yes and to do that behavior. And we know that emotion's important, certainly, but philanthropic psychologist tells us that it's not the most important thing. The most important thing or things are the supporters' goals. What's their identity? If I'm talking to animal rights advocates, is that me? If I'm writing about animal rights advocates, that's something that would resonate with me, certainly. And the perceived impact. Did what I do feed kids? Did what I do save animals? Did what I do help the environment? These are the things that are really important in terms of when we talk to our supporters. And identity has a lot of different aspects. I'm an animal rights advocate. I'm a father. I'm a University of Virginia alumni. I'm a professional fundraiser, et cetera. And I want to show you some research now that has to do with tailoring messaging to identity. And this is work done by Kiki Kutmaridou out of the UK, another UK researcher. And I'll show you this first one. This was for Make-A-Wish. These were Facebook ads. And they went only to medical professionals. So these are doctors, nurses, people that are involved in the healthcare. And the first message, the control just said, when you donate and help grant a wish, you help her fight her illness, okay? Second group of these folks got a message, same thing, but it also said, as a medical professional, you know the heartache of a child diagnosed with a critical illness. And then again, when you donate and help grant a wish, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what was the difference between the first and the second ad? The second ad had a 41% increase in the response rate. Staggering, just the little, it wasn't a huge play on their identity. It was just general, their profession. But even that kind of general identity recognition had a huge effect on them responding to the ad.
So Otis?
Yeah.
So we have two examples here. One is not terrible. When you donate and help grant a wish, you help her fight her illness. That's very you-centric. That's a great message. The step down from that, or worse than that, would be a message that said, help us grant her a wish. Your gift will support this important work by us. So, when you think about the potential here is huge. If we can get them into talking about the person and then take it a step further and talk about specific identity attributes, that's a world of good in terms of open rates, click-through rates, and ultimately donation and retention. Would you agree?
It is. People believe that they have to educate people as to the benefits of their organization and all the activities of the organization and so forth. And the reason they do that, it's understandable, because they want to show people that they're worthy of their support. It's very, very reasonable. But it turns out that's really not what people care about. What they care about is their ability to act through the organization to have an impact, to make something happen. So it really it raises much more money, it turns out, not to talk about the organization, but to talk about this is what you can accomplish. And, it's just, go ahead.
So impact messaging, we used that phrase earlier. Impact messaging in this case, using this kind of language, is about what you accomplished. You accomplished a 50-cent decrease in the incidence of X, right? Through your gift.
Right. And yes.
Then you layer on some identity attributes, which you've collected through cleverly designed research by people like Jen and us. And then you layer that in, and then you get the spike again. Right?
Sure. I was just editing a nonprofit's website this morning, and they said, your support will help us to blah, blah, blah. And I just crossed out the help us to. Your support will, this is what it will do. There's, eliminate the middleman. There's really no reason to have that language that's there. It's much more impactful if we're just telling them what their support will do. Not what their support will help us do, but what their support will do, because that's what they really care about.
Good.
Now, this second example is with an organization I'm very familiar with. I come from Iowa, the land of Scots in the United States. I'm mostly Scottish. And this is for Ducks Unlimited. I'm very familiar with Ducks Unlimited. My people, my family are all duck hunters, except for me. I was the kid playing the piano. I was the big tall kid playing the piano. But my cousins, uncles, and grandfathers were traipsing through the field in freezing cold weather. And they all have these Ducks Unlimited jackets. And so this was a Facebook ad to renew your membership for Ducks Unlimited. And it said this: backed by popular demand, join, renew, or extend your membership today and receive the quilted jacket as our gift to you, known as the Ducks Unlimited jacket. And again, this was a Facebook ad. This got a 1.33% conversion. So 1.3% of people that read this ad, pretty good rate, actually renewed their membership. Then they tried another approach, and they didn't offer anything. They just appealed to people's conservationist identity. As a conservationist, you know how important the wetlands are to flood control, clean water, and the wildlife who call them home. Help our shared ecosystem and be a supporter of one of the world's largest wetland conservation organizations. Okay? Drum roll, please. The conversion rate for that was 1.34%. So basically, there was no difference in the premium ad of the jacket and the identity-based ad that didn't offer people anything. And I would also bet that the people that were acquired through their identity, if they're continued to be messaged in an appropriate way, are going to be sustainable supporters of Ducks Unlimited, because they're not in it for the jacket. The jacket just sends them the wrong message.
Nor did they have the exchange fiction happening.
Right, exactly, yeah. Exactly. So Katrina, do you want to talk about this? So this is two alternative ways to message your supporters about the same thing.
I sometimes think you put that up just to poke me, because for 20 years, we've been writing that first one. Thank you for raising $100 for the 2020 Walk to End Hunger. We have been doing that for 25, 30 years.
So that's an example of messaging people for doing something.
For what they did. So
right.
We were recognizing people for what they did, as opposed to recognizing people for who they are, which is, thank you for being a compassionate, caring person who wants to end world hunger. And what we know now is that while potentially that first message might get a quick bump, ultimately it will hurt your relationship and your revenue. The second message, it's not been heavily tested in the peer-to-peer segment, to be frank, but that we think will perform well and will leave people in a condition where they will continue to interact with you, fundraise for you, and donate to you. So this is really it. Recognizing people for who they are versus what they did helps affirm their identity. And they respond really well to that. Really well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this guy, Seth Godin, marketing guru. I've read a number of his books. He sums it up very well in terms of successful brand and marketing campaigns. This is what you want. You want to communicate that people like us do things like this. And that's actually a line I've written in copy because it really is such a simple, powerful message. Why should we do this? People like us do things like this. And it gets at people's identity, and it's very, very effective.
Yes.
Oh, yes. And I forgot we put this in. This is lovely. Now, I got this a month ago. American Cancer Society has been on a bunch of our webinars. They're not a client, although we have been chatting with them about this topic a little bit informally. And I understand that they have been known as kind of a traditionalist in terms of their marketing and their messaging campaign. So I was surprised when I got this. You save lives, you celebrate lives, you lead the fight for a world without cancer. And that, in a nutshell, is a great example of how to message people in terms of who they are and what kind of an impact they can have. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This is about a dozen words that says volumes, and this is perfect pitch and is based on what we know about philanthropic psychology.
And so we want to know a couple of things. So if you showed up to your leadership with copy like this, how hard would it be for you to get it done, to actually get it in print, on the website, in the email, on social media? How hard would it be? We're going to kick off a poll to ask you that question. And we are going to go through all the questions after we finish. We made sure we had time to do that. Otis and I have chat. When he got this, he said, come here, you got to see this, you got to see this. And number one, brilliant. If there's an American Cancer Society person on, please send kudos to the right people. But number two, we tried to envision the fights that happened when this copy showed up and how hard someone must have fought to get it to this condition where it was distributed. Because, you know, my office is downstairs, Otis's is upstairs in our house, and I can actually hear him sometimes go, no, because they've edited the U out of the copy. They've taken it out. They want more corporate language. It's right back to what we said last year in one shape or another. And it's very difficult to get language like this approved for release. So we're closing the poll. Otis?
You know, I write copy for dozens of nonprofits, and I was explaining this approach to someone recently, and with the big national nonprofit, healthcare nonprofit. And they said, "Oh, that sounds great." And I said, "Well, I was writing a campaign for them." And I said, "Okay, how hard do you want me to go?" And they said, "Go all the way." And I said, "How do you feel about sending a Valentine in June?" And then they kind of stopped and thought and said, we'll try. Because, you know, the purpose, my belief is that the purpose for all of this messaging, any donor supporter message, is to make them happy, is to make them feel good. And we can do two things. We can make them feel good by saying the impact that their support has had for people, the tangible things that they've made possible, or we can thank them. And, you know, I think I said in something about that copy, why are we sending you a Valentine in June? Because you're a caring, et cetera, person. That means you're special all the time. That means you should get a Valentine in June. So it's okay to get a Valentine in June. So, you know, these are the kind of things that we do now, and it just raises a lot more money.
Yep. So we had 53% of people think that their organization would embrace it. That is great. Nobody said, oh no, this won't fly. I have no idea, 5%. And we're already using it 21%. Might get there with some convincing 21%. So I'll give you my experience. Otis does most of our writing for us and editing for us. And that seems maybe weird having a social psychologist do that, but it actually makes perfect sense. So I occasionally will try my hand at something and immediately get whacked. And the reason I'll get whacked is because I will phrase something like this. Suzanne, you are so important to people experiencing metastatic cancer, breast cancer. Thank you for helping us impact the lives of people like you. So and he will take it and he's like, us. Why would you say us? If you say us, there's a division between the donor and the organization. and the mission. There is no us. It sounds like Yoda. There is no us. There is only we. There is only you. So it's trickier than it sounds. You know, it sounds like it's an easy thing to do. And then the hard thing is, you know, people all agree we should have a strategy, but we don't all agree that there should be a strategy for the way that we use words. And so everybody in their own head has a strategy. And when your lovely copy leaves your desk, everyone else's strategy will get applied to it. And then it will come back as an unrecognizable pile of poo, right? And that's the experience we have. So that's what we got for you today. I'm going to turn to the questions now, and you guys can read some of them. Hopefully we've answered some already. We talked about walk recognition for Sarah. Brian asked, in your experience, what's the best way to approach recognition to help ensure retention? Otis, you want to take that?
Yeah, impact, thank them, and impact language. You know, the typical sequence in direct response is ask, thank, report. Repeat, ask, thank, report, ask, thank, report. So, you know, the organization cares most about the asking. What the receiver cares about, or supporters cares about, is they care about the thank you and the reporting. You know, what did my support do? So I think really beefing up that thanking and reporting aspect is really, really important. And I get asked all the time, how many communications, emails, messages are right for in a single year? How much is too much? And I said, 95% of the time, it's what you're doing is not enough. And so you really need to engage with people more. So, you know, meaningful engagement is the way to retain people.
So Otis, sorry to put you on the spot. Give me an example of you-centric messaging using an identity attribute in the ask.
I'm sorry.
Give me an example of you-centric messaging.
Yep.
Using an identity attribute. Take me, I'm caring, in the ask.
Well, I'll be the judge if you're caring. You're not always caring. Let's just say nobody's caring all the time. I'm writing. Let's take the animal rights thing, because that's something I'm familiar with. I'm writing to you today because you're a caring defender of animals. So just priming that identity.
Okay.
And then laying out some examples. And everything that we read there, they think, oh, is that me? Yes. Is that me? Yes. Is that me? Is that me? And so that's the way to, not that the animal shelter of Greater Greenwich, Connecticut does all these great things, but do you care about rescuing? Do you care about rescuing strays? Do you think that there should be more leash laws? Do you think that there should? And if I say yes, that's me, then I'm ready to actually take action and do something.
So how would I use that identity attribute in my thanking? Same way, just eliminate the ask. Right?
Absolutely, I would say, and you talked a little bit about it earlier. Thanking people for who they are, not what they do.
Okay, and then impact reporting. How would you do that you-centric using a identity attribute in impact reporting? It's really hard not to talk about the organization in that situation. How do I avoid that?
Well, it is, but what you do, you don't talk about the organization. You talk about an individual that's been helped. If it's somebody who's hungry and so on. And I know this sounds awful, but with ask, if you're in a pediatric hospital, with the ask, you get a sad face. This is somebody that you should help. With the reporting, you get a happy face. There's some interesting research on animal shelters, and it showed when, for years, they had run pictures of strays and so forth who were in disheveled and in bad shape, and they said, gosh, people are probably getting tired of that. Let's show them some great stories about animals that we helped that are now doing much better. And so they put those animals in the ask. and their donations plummeted because people want, when they're asked, they want to see something that they can impact. They kind of put the cart before the horse in this. So in the asking, it's describing the situation. What can you do to help? What can you do to alleviate suffering, et cetera, et cetera. In the reporting, it's see what a difference you made. So that's the sequence. Now, you know, and let me just say, I'll go one more thing. That's the trouble with the recognition emails that we have to write, because we have to say, thank you for raising $100. Then we have to talk about how there's still a terrible situation. And then we have to ask again. So we have to thank, report, and ask in the same message. And it just doesn't work well.
Very good. Nicole has a question. Curious if any studies have shown whether this applies to events as well, i.e. events with less swag/gifts given out are more successful in bringing these people into events in the future. There is no research on that exactly that way. What I can share with you is that we've done research at Turnkey when we were fulfilling product, and what we found is that when we offered product that was fully fungible, and what I mean by that is we offered product that was something you could buy from Amazon, a grill without a brand on it, without the nonprofit brand on it, a jacket without the nonprofit brand, a purse, things like that, vacuum cleaners. Yes, people do that. We found that those people, their performance suffered immediately the next year, the people who were offered and redeemed gifts like that. And so that's what drove us to offer less and less and less, and to make it entirely not fungible. So fungible means it can be used as currency. When you pop a brand on it, the Humane Society brand, you know, it becomes non-fungible, unfungible, infungible. I'm not sure. You can't sell it. So that's the only verified study I could point you at. You know, again, a lot of this research is coming out of direct response, middle and major giving, not done in peer space. There's not a lot of research about the psychology of peer-to-peer fundraising, which we were shocked at when we wrote our book 3 years ago. We did a search to make sure we didn't steal somebody else's title. It turned out there were no other books. There were no other books on peer-to-peer at all, much less behavioral economics or anything even coming close to psychology. So this is an area of opportunity for our industry, and our current, all the hell that broke loose the last 3 months, this is an opportunity too. We are beginning to understand things about our constituents and to react to our constituents in different ways. And I think we're going to come out of COVID and everything else that's going on in a better place than where we went in, because we have been doing things because we've always done things. And I will put recognition gifts in that category. Okay, public television relies heavily on gifts. Personally, I'd prefer not to get anything. It's not something I ever wanted. Why do you think they do it? They do it because they did it. That's the whole answer right there. And now they can't stop doing it, because like out of the 1,000 gifts they send, 4 people on the board are going to get mad if they don't send them this year. We've all been there. It's a terrible spot. Okay. Many of us in the field edit our corporate messages even if they tell us not to, because we don't like how it reflects our personality. Do you think it would be stepping on toes to provide this webinar to them to try and convince them why the you is so important and making that connection outside of gifts? Always throw the consultant under the bus. So yeah, send them the webinar. It's fine. You know, that way they get mad at us. They don't get mad at you. Everybody happy. I mean, except us, but then you love us, so it's good. All right, Amanda, often strategies using you are widely accepted with stewardship messaging. It is harder when integrating this language into broader branding, as it speaks to a more general audience, and you may be speaking to someone who is not yet a donor. Do you recommend you-centric language in all messaging, or more specifically aligned with stewardship and recognition? Otis?
Branding, that difficult word. Most people think branding is what people think about the organization, but really branding is just what people feel about the organization. So everything we've talked about with regard to branding is exactly right on. You messages can, yes, you-centric messaging is definitely going to impact how people feel about the organization. You know, Budweiser doesn't do those Christmas commercials where they have the jingle bells and the horses and the Christmas carols and everything. They're associating their beer with how you feel about Christmas. So again, these messages, it's complicated psychology, but it's easy to boil down to. It's about making people feel good about their association with you. And if they feel good about their association with you, you will have a strong brand. That is what branding is all about. Did I say that forcefully enough?
I think you did. Do you want to say
I tried to.
radio voice? Big radio voice with that?
People think that well, what are marketing departments to do? Well, we need to have all the information about the great stuff that the organization is doing available, because people need to trust the organization. But it shouldn't be the lead for the ask. That should be, what can you do? What can we enable you to do?
All right, back to Brian. He's got good questions. Thank you, Brian. Have you moved entirely away from fundraising incentives? All right, look at me, Brian. Do that. Don't say incentive anymore. Or are there times when they can still be appropriate and effective? We're still figuring it out. I mean, I think that I agree with Otis that the unexpected gift could yield positive benefits, and gifts of low value certainly are going to hurt any relationship less. We also know that our people are somewhat addicted to gifts with a brand on them, so we can't ignore that entirely. But I do think that we have to change our language. We have to quit treating it like a transaction. It is deadly to our relationship with our constituents when we pretend, or when we imply that if you'll just fundraise $1,000, I'll hook you up with the jacket. That's bad in so many ways. And we know that in terms of the data and the outcomes later, it's really bad. So we have to be very careful. And the transition is hard, and you have to be really thoughtful. Lisa said, would using the word challenges versus incentives to appeal to people's competitive nature? I'm going to guess that you might be in the endurance space, or potentially, because people's competitive nature is really apparent there. Incentives, I don't think fits in our world anywhere in that word. Challenges, better. Recognition, better. Are they competitive with each other? Yeah, they are. There's an impact. One of the things that I think is really important to understand about these principles that we're talking about is that it's not an on or off switch. It can be true that people have a competitive nature, and we might be able to squeeze some money out of that. And it can also be true that using transactional language to spur their competitive nature might be negative. Those two things can be true. Otis, early in our relationship, he used a phrase that I really like, and it's called crowding out. And Otis, I'll bastardize it if I try and explain what crowding out is in terms of psychological biases and impulses. Can you explain that?
Crowding out is just, so let's say you do something because it's something that you believe in. And we showed some examples of crowding out here today. And then somebody offers you a gift for doing something that you do for free. So what happens is the social relationship, I'm doing this because I like you, and I think this work is important, gets crowded out by the transactional. Now I'm doing it and you're giving me a stipend. And so what we know, psychologists know, is that the market relationship, as we say, this transaction crowds out the social. And suddenly it's not so enjoyable for you to do the thing that you enjoyed when you weren't getting paid to do it, or you weren't receiving anything to do it.
But at the same time, there could be a body of people that are hyper motivated by fundraising competition. I'll use Bike MS as the example. They have a brilliant thing where your jersey number, or your thing, the piece of paper on your back, what is that thing? Your number. The lower it is, the more fundraising you had. So if you're number one this year, last year you were the top fundraiser. That's brilliant. That covers a multitude of sins. You could just about do anything, and that's still going to work because you've given them such an overt, highly visible place to exhibit pro-social behaviors, which is a huge driver of behavior. So, it's not simple. It's not easy. We're at 3:02, so if you have to leave, no worries. I think we've answered all the questions, and you guys have been great. Brian, thanks for letting me play with you. And we're done. Otis, anything else?
No, I think that. Thank you so much for coming. Again, this is the next wave, and we've embraced this because number one, the Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy. The word sustainable is in there because people stay longer with the nonprofits because they're happier with the relationship. And just as a byproduct of that, not only are they happier, but they support the organization more. So this is where it's at. This is where we want to be, and I hope that this is where you'll wind up as well.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.